Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Instant Expert. In this episode, we are going to be covering Bertrand Russell's Barber Paradox. So the Barber Paradox was written by Bertrand Russell in the early 20th century. The paradox is a story about a barber in a town where nobody has a beard. The barber is somebody who shaves everybody who does not shave themselves, so nobody goes unshaven. But who shaves the barber? If he shaves himself, then the barber shaves someone who also shaves themselves, which breaks the rule of the barber only shaving people who do not shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then there is someone in the town that hasn't been shaved, and we all know that everyone must be shaved. If you're listening and your brain is completely frazzled, then don't fret. There's no answer to this paradox, and it actually sent Gottlob Frege into a nervous breakdown after Bertrand Russell sent him this paradox. He spent 20 years trying to figure out an answer, and then decided to just give up. That's all for this episode. If you want to hear more about your paradoxes, be sure to subscribe so you too can be an instant expert. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Instant Expert. In this episode, we are going to be covering Achilles and the Tortoise. So Achilles and the Tortoise is a paradox which has been confusing mathematicians, physicists, philosophers, and pretty much everyone for the last 2,500 years. Written by a Greek philosopher around 450 BC, the paradox explains the argument of distance versus time. If a tortoise was to race Achilles with a head start of 100 meters, could Achilles ever win the race? You'd think yes, because Achilles is faster than a tortoise. But Xenon argued whether this was actually really possible. In the time it takes for Achilles to make up the 100 meters, the tortoise would have traveled an extra 10 meters. And in the time it takes for Achilles to make up the 10 meters, the tortoise would have traveled an extra meter, and so on and so forth. So Achilles can never catch up. But of course we all know Achilles will catch up. So why does this cause so much confusion? Why has it for the last 2,500 years? Well, there's no real answer, just like most paradoxes. If the great philosophical minds can't figure out an answer, then what chance have us ordinary folk got? Well, that's all for this episode. If you want to hear more about paradoxes, be sure to subscribe so you too can become an instant expert. Hi there and welcome to episode 3 of Instant Expert. In this episode, we are going to be talking about the Cretan Liar paradox. The Cretan Liar paradox began in 600 BC. Epimenides made a statement which has puzzled people for thousands of years since. He said all Cretans are liars. Epimenides himself is a Cretan, and in 1869, over 2,000 years after he died, Thomas Fowler stated that if in fact Epimenides is right, and all Cretans are liars, then he himself must be a liar. But if that is right, and he is a liar, then the statement he originally made, that being all Cretans are liars, must be a lie. This disproves the original statement meaning all Cretans are not liars. Therefore, he must be lying and telling the truth at the same time, which creates the whole paradox. If a person claims they always lie, are they lying or are they telling the truth? Well, here's the truth. This whole paradox is a lie. So how about them apples, eh? That's all for this episode. If you want to hear more about paradoxes, be sure to subscribe so you too can become an instant expert. Welcome back to Instant Expert. In our 4th episode, we are going to be talking about the boy and girl paradox. The boy and girl paradox is one of the newer paradoxes in the series, dating back to 1959. It was written by Martin Gardner and is also known as the two children problem. This paradox is a story of a family with 2 children. One of them is a boy, but what is the probability of the other child also being a boy? Your first reaction would be that there is a 50-50 chance of the second child being a boy, because there are only 2 gender options. but Gardner argued that the chance is really a third. That's not possible, you might think, but really, in a two-child family, there are 4 possible combinations. 2 brothers, 2 sisters, an older brother with a younger sister, or an older sister with a younger brother. Seeing as we already know that the first child's gender is a boy, we can rule out the 2 sisters option, which leaves 3 remaining combinations, meaning the chances of the second child being a boy must be a third. The difference with this paradox compared to the others is that lots of people have come to their own conclusion. The main argument being that the older brother with a younger sister is the same as an older sister with a younger brother. You still have 1 boy and 1 girl. This paradox isn't as complicated as the previous 3 in the series, but let us know your opinions. That is all for this episode. If you want to hear more about paradoxes, be sure to subscribe so you too can be an instant expert. Welcome to the 5th episode of Instant Expert. This time we will be discussing the Raven Paradox. The Raven Paradox is probably the most complex of all the paradoxes chosen for this series. It was written by logician Hempel in the 1940s and is also known as Hempel's Paradox or Hempel's Ravens. It questions how can we tell what is true from a statement. Hempel starts the paradox with a proposition. He said all ravens are black. So we can assume from the statement that everything that is not black is not a raven. Both these statements are linked. For instance, if we found out one is false, then the other must also be false. What makes this sentence a paradox is when the statement all ravens are black is linked to a completely different and unrelated statement. For example, if I was to say this red thing is a bus, it supports the original statement that everything that is not black is not a raven, as we have found a bus which we know is not a raven because it isn't black. I know this conclusion seems obvious, but the paradox part of these statements is that we can find out information about a raven by looking at a bus. This can be applied to any object. We can find out new information about someone or something we might not have known because of the information we know about something else. As I said, very confusing, but it wouldn't be a paradox if it wasn't. That's all for this episode. If you want to hear more about paradoxes, be sure to subscribe so you too can become an instant expert. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Instant Expert. We're almost at the end of our series with the Schrödinger's cat paradox. This is a paradox as well as a thought experiment, which is slightly different to the other paradoxes in the series, but all will soon become clear. In 1935, Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger designed a paradox which presents a cat that could be both dead and alive at the same time. The story is that a cat is put in a box that cannot be opened with 2 things: a cup of poison and a radioactive source. If a monitor detects radioactivity, then the cup will shatter, spilling the poison and killing the cat. So how will we know if the cat is alive or dead without looking inside the box? This result means the cat can be alive and dead simultaneously, as we cannot know whether the cup of poison has shattered or not. This thought experiment also links to the one about a tree falling in a forest, which will be featured in our next episode of Instant Expert. So be sure to subscribe for our final episode in the series. Hello and welcome to our final episode. To round off our series, we will be discussing the paradox of a tree falling in a forest. Sounds simple enough. Now, this paradox is thought to have started with George Berkeley in the 1700s, who proposed the idea of whether sound exists without anyone to hear it. The idea was adapted years later, and in 1883, a similar question was posed. If a tree were to fall on an island where there were no human beings, would there be any sound? Scientists went on to answer the query with a no, as they argued that sound can only be heard if there are ears to hear it. Sound is objective to the senses. The joint efforts of Charles Ribbold Mann and George Ransom Twist developed the phrasing in 1910 to the question that we know today. When a tree falls in a lonely forest and there is no animal nearby to hear it, does it make a sound? How can we know if it makes a sound if we aren't there to hear it? And how can we hear it if it doesn't make a sound? All of these unanswered questions are what paradoxes are all about. The most captivating part of these philosophical contradictions is they've been around for years and still remain with no conclusions. That's all for this episode. Thank you for following the series and congratulations, you are now an instant expert.